John, do you think we are overreacting to the coronavirus threat?
God, how on earth do I answer that? Whatever I say, somebody will be cross with me. If I say we're not, I'll have the whole establishment on down my neck, won't I? Yes, I think I better pass on this one. I'm going to use a long word, and I'm not quite sure what it means myself, but I think it's right. By extraordinary propensity, which means our tendency to fear. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? Not so long ago, people were getting really quite panicky about Brexit, weren't they? About whether the whole world was going to collapse after Brexit and we were going to face starvation in the shops because of lack of food supplies and one thing and another. It's quite... and now, of course, we're jumping straight into this ocean of fear about this infection. Well, it really is an extraordinary phenomenon. How readily... It's almost as though we love fear. Yes, it's not too an exaggeration to say that. And how often very resentful we are at people that don't take our fear seriously. We get really upset, don't we, if someone challenges our fear. We hold it close to our hearts. We do love it in a strangely perverted way. So, well, let's consider it, in a broader context, bringing in, of course, my favourite subject of spirit. Let's come back to being here and now, which is really the absolute key to all these rather imponderable questions. We have to come back to the simplicity of simply being present now. And just let into the situation this eternally present, invisible presence, which I've referred to in practically every one of these videos. That which, of course, is completely unshaken by the dramas of this world. And, well, it suddenly just comes into my mind the words of the 23rd Psalm, I think the 23rd. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And what do we mean by thou? As he goes on in the next verse, thy rock and thy staff will comfort me. Now I walk with a walking stick, a staff. I know very well what it is to feel the support of that third leg, as it were, as I wobble about on my own two legs. It's very comforting. And even more so is left for those that find it is this invisible friend. The I am with you. I am with you. And not so long ago, some clever person pointed out to me, and I think it's right, that in the Bible there are 365 references to don't be afraid, fear not. One for every day of the year. It's rather remarkable, isn't it? The Bible's full of clever things like this. You never believe it, half of them. But it is so. Don't be afraid. Well, of course, when we are not in touch with this invisible third point, then we sort of seesaw between good and bad and black and white and what's called duality. And so we very easily sort of tip over into fear. When we get to this third point, this invisible presence, well, at least the balance is in balance, isn't it? It is literally like an old pair of kitchen scales. But this goes up and down, it's in balance. fear not. Well, the body's going to die anyway, isn't it? If it doesn't die of coronavirus today, it'll die of something else tomorrow. So in a way, so what? All this, we go, we are pleased as punch when we get some cure for the latest disease. And when we all go around shouting hooray when the coronavirus dies out or is cured or something. But we're still going to die. None of us are going to not die. Well, you might say, what's all the fuss about? Why not turn instead to the much greater surety of one's eternal life? And then we don't worry too much about what the body dies of. When you're sure of your identity with the eternal, in other words, when you discover what man really is, which is this spiritual, which is spirit, then, dear friends, the worries about the flesh, they diminish, and they go on diminishing as the identity with spirit gets stronger until, you really just laugh at it.
We do seem to be fascinated by fear. It seems to be a universal factor in the human experience. And as you say, we do tend to cling on to it almost like a comfort blanket. Don't take away my fear. What is this universal sense of being attached like Velcro to our fear?
I wouldn't like to be too specific, even if I knew, really, but some people that write about these things might suggest that it's all part of the ego's self-survival technique, because the ego is that part of us that is not this spirit, it's not the spiritual presence. The ego is a very transitory creature indeed. And as all creatures of transience, it does worry about when the time comes when it will go puff and be no more. Because we have paid attention to our ego for at least the whole of our lives, the more attention you give it, the more it expands, doesn't it? It gets bigger and bigger. And very many people, by the time they've reached middle age, their ego's so big they can't really see anything else. They're completely dominated by what I think my life. I don't want to die of coronavirus. Why should other people infect me? Of course, it's all me-centered, isn't it? And this me really is I better watch my language now again. Is the cause of all our trouble, because it thinks it's separate and it completely refuses to acknowledge that it's just a shadow, as it were, an inversion of what we really are, which is this eternal spirit.
I once heard an acronym for fear which seems to have stuck: false expectations appearing real.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Just reviewing, you would have thought in our modern scientific-minded society we would just take a more rational approach. But if we look at the numbers, John, it's quite surprising. The actual number of cases reported, it is getting more serious. It's spreading much more rapidly outside of China now, I understand, with 80,000 cases and nearly 3,000 deaths worldwide. Last year, 2019, common flu, there were 5 million cases and between 300 and 600,000 deaths worldwide, or somewhere over 30,000 deaths from common flu each month. It doesn't hit the press. Car deaths, the latest figures actually from 2016, 1.25 million people died worldwide in car accidents, car incidents. So as supposedly rational modern people, we have a rather irrational approach to this.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes, indeed. Well, it sells the newspapers, doesn't it? Maybe that's the reason. No doubt the manufacturers of face masks are doing a booming trade. and that I thought you were a beekeeper at first when I came into the church. That's to keep the virus out, is it? Did you buy that from the chemist too?
No, I got it. No, they'd sold out at the chemist. I got it from the builder's merchant. I said I was going to do some spray painting. I didn't want to admit it was for this.
And, yes, indeed. These. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh when I'm talking about car accidents. Of course not. It's extraordinary, isn't it, that these are accepted as a sort of hazard of life, and in a way have lost their hold on the public imagination.
I'm just wondering, it's a bit lateral thinking, but you're from a farming background. Did you not have sort of the same Mexican wave of fear when there was an outbreak of foot and mouth?
No, it actually, that was another very familiar example to me, the way that fear did spread during those occasions. I remember thinking how absurd it was that the government then introduced some rather drastic policies of slaughtering all the suspect animals, which of course was a big thing for anybody whose herd happened to be in the firing line. I forget, hundreds of thousands of beautiful creatures were killed then for a very sort of questionable reason. I remember in South America seeing foot and mouth. Nobody bothered about it there. It was just common among animals. It seemed to come and go, and it was like a common cold. They'd get the sniffles and get blisters in their mouths and on their feet, and I think they'd get over it then. So what was all the fuss about? But can I make another serious point? Because you see, again, we're so blinded by with these eyes of flesh, that's what they see. The eye of the flesh sees flesh. Mortality sees mortality. So the things we see with the eyes of flesh are, of course, subject to all these things. But a far, far infinitely greater scourge of the human race is just inner spiritual blindness, or just bad thoughts. Think how the whole world is polluted by bad thoughts. My dears, compared to bad thinking, all the chemicals and plastic in the world is peanuts compared to the filth, the polluting filth that is poured out of human hearts daily in terms of unkind words, judgment of others, stirring up fear. There's an example. What is it but the mischievous, the mischief-making ego that is causing all this fuss? And look at the effect of it worldwide. And isn't that damaging in the very guts of the human situation, turning us away from the hope, from a more reasonable hope in this ever-present presence, which is there for any fool to see. It's as simple as pie once you get turned in that direction and see it, and it changes the whole focus of life. So, but it's politically incorrect. You're not allowed to condemn people for thinking their thoughts. That's just not part of the agenda these days, isn't it? So it goes unnoticed. And the national health and all these things, they all attend to trying to correct this seesaw of the flesh, and virtually no attention whatsoever is given to try to control this evil thoughts. That's what they are. They're evil thoughts. Because evil is true life turned the wrong way around. It's the darkness. It's the darkness spreading its influence.
We're not a million miles from Eyam, which is called the plague village, or Eyam, only a few miles down the road, which quarantined itself in the, I can't remember whether it was the 16th century. And it's a rather grimly, it's quite a visitor attraction. As opposed to protecting little me, there's this other aspect, isn't there, John, of protecting your kith and kin, or your community, not just looking after number one.
Yes, again, well, protecting, dears, which really touches on, you might say, how does spiritual practice affect other people? What use is it, Phil and me, sitting here meditating every day? What about the world? Why don't we go and help the world? Or does it? Well, let's consider it. Of course, another word for meditation is prayer. Now, prayer usually consists of just saying, God, please help all those afflicted by coronavirus. But whether, well, obviously that puts out a good vibe into the world. But to actually sit here, you see, and recognize that in the light of spirit, in the light of this presence, this is the reality not only of you and me, but of everyone, without exception. This indestructible, immortal I am. Many times in these videos I've referred to the icon of St. George, which I don't have with me. It's in my flat where I live. But it shows, there's the dragon writhing about on the ground, and St. George on his white horse with his face completely serene, in contact with God, looking down from the cloud, just dances over it, you see. And he has a lance in his hand, and he doesn't slay the dragon. What on earth for? There's no blood on it. He just looks at it with a shaft of light and sees that it's just a shadow. That's all it is, my dears. This world is a shadow of divine origin. It comes to pass just like a nightmare. It has no reality in itself. It's only real insofar as we believe in it. That is the fact. And when one person even has the foggiest notion of this, it somehow raises the general level of consciousness, even only a tiny little fraction. And those that recognize it more fully help to raise it even more. It's as though embracing the whole world, you see, are these levels of consciousness, from fear and ignorance and the darkness, the outer darkness, up through various levels of light, towards higher and higher levels of enlightenment, up to full realization. Now those that fully realize the infinite nature of man, they lift the whole world. As a young man, I struggled to understand why prayer was considered by some of the great saints to be so important. To me, I couldn't really figure it out. I thought then in terms of what can I do with the world. I was a strong young man. I wanted to work with my hands, make the world a better place. But as I've come to understand it better, I now have no doubt that there's no more effective work than this work of prayer, which is raising consciousness, which is what happens when we meditate. For in meditating we let go the dragon, as it were, this powers of darkness, all that is corrupt and mortal. In other words, this, we let go our attachment to it. It's still there sitting on the chair, but we let go this death-like grip on it, like we're hanging on to fear now. We let go. We realize, good heavens, I'm not dead. I'm actually free of my body, and I'm alive as I've never been before. This is freedom. This is what they've been talking about. This is actually the kingdom of God. This is what it's all about. This is why Jesus says, seek ye first this kingdom of God, which is right here and now within us, and then it all falls into place. Then the dragon's just a dragon. You fraud. You can laugh at him, smile at him. It's like one. Why do people love these frightening films? You know, all these sort of supermen slaying the millions. People actually wallow in it, don't they? We all love this drama of light and darkness, and that's what it is. This virus and all these sort of things that grip the humanity in its fear are all really this drama enacting in our own lives. And because it's not on a television screen, it's actually in the press, we take it for real. It's no more real than these things on wherever you find them. We just think it is. We believe it is. We enslave ourselves in this self-delusion. Well, it is real unless and until we wake up to something better. And I suspect that perhaps most of the many people who watch these videos do so with an inkling that there is something better and a desire to find it. Well, you can find it, my dears. The path has been trodden by many people, and it's well documented. I'm only one of many who have realized it, and I'm pleased to share it. Perfect love casteth out fear. My mind goes back to one evening in Paris, in France, when, as a young man, in my early 20s, I was very much in love with a French girl. Well, as so often happens, she liked me, but she wasn't quite so besotted with me as I was with her. So she was quite happy to have other boyfriends. Well, I remember on this occasion I'd gone to Paris to see her, and was rather put out to realise she was with another chap. And I was sitting in a cafe, alone, late one night. Streets were quiet, thinking about this. And something, I don't know what, something somehow lifted me out of that self-pity into that misery of my love being challenged now by another chap, and somehow expanded it, so that I was able to love her even though she was with another man. I didn't have to have her for mine. And I've loved her like that ever since. This is not the first time this has happened with someone I loved. In fact, it's almost the story of my life. So that fear of losing what you hold most dear. You see, what is imperfect love? The imperfection of this life is caused by what we call the ego, the I, me, mine, that which separates us from the truth, which is the ever-present I am, which is not only complete freedom, complete life, completeness, it is the pure and perfect love we all long for. All these words are really synonymous. They're just different ways of describing the same thing. Love, freedom, fulfillment, completion, being, life eternal, spirit, God. It's all really the same thing in different scales. So there you are. When we're anchored in that divine reality, it indeed casts out fear, which is simply caused by our absence from the presence of God. And when we lose that absolute security, we become dependent on the wobbly comings and goings of this world, and especially of love, which, if anything, is a wobbly thing, as many people find to their cost. A few things more wobbly than relationship. Well, then, of course, we live with fear of losing it.